Greetings, hello, and welcome to Slight's Solo Nightmare Crown Prince Tips video, part 2 of my epic Crown Prince guide. In this video, it's going to be a little bit less produced. Most of the people who are going to be looking for Solo Nightmare tips are not looking for the most produced content, they just want the information. So that is what I'm going to go and give you. I'm going to just try to flip between my notes here and the game and some wiki pages, and we are going to talk this through. So let's get through it. Alright, first things first is let's talk about some elemental fusion damage calculations. First off, Miasma. Miasma is a static percentage max health damage over time effect that can stack up to 9 times. Although I've never seen it go above 7 myself, but I trust the guys on the Gunfire wiki. They do a really good job. It deals 5 ticks of damage. Each tick of damage is estimated to be around 12% of a normal enemy's max HP, which means that they will tick for 5 seconds with 1 stack of Miasma for 70% of their max HP, so it does a huge amount of damage. The implication, though, is that max HP does not include shields and armor. So, one of the points that was made to me is that if there was ever an enemy that only had shield and no health, then Miasma would literally do no damage to them, because it's always based on max health. So certain enemies are easier than others. The more health that they have compared to their shield and armor, the better off the Miasma damage is going to be. Alright, this greatly reduces for elites and bosses. This is probably a review for most of you, but normal enemies take that full percentage damage, elites take less, and then bosses take even less. So some bosses are going to take more damage from Miasma than others, because the Golem is pretty good as far as a Miasma damage build, because he's full HP. The final boss is the same way, but the worm, the Ichthyosaurus, poses probably the biggest problem for Miasma builds. It's just not very strong against his high armor. And I think he split straight up 50-50 health and armor. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's the way that works. Alright, the AoE damage. So Miasma applies its damage, right? Let's go look at it. So other enemies nearby will also take damage. I'm right here. Miasma can stack up to 9 times. The damage is lower against elites and even lower against bosses. Okay, but what is that AoE damage? Is it just a static amount of damage? Is it based off the person who's miasma'd, or is it based off something else? So when I looked up in the Gunfire Discord and talked to some people there, they told me that the damage that units take in the area of miasma is the same percentage health that they would take as if they were miasma'd. So this is interesting, because this starts to get into how we can make Miasma really strong, and how I make Miasma strong, because I tend to play a Miasma build when I play the Crown Prince. The idea is that, say you have 3 enemies that are right next to each other, and all 3 of them get Miasma at the same time. Well, actually, 1 Miasma stack on each of them is the same as all 3 of them having 3 stacks, as long as they're close together, because the Miasma ticks from the other ones are applying to 2 others. So you've got 1, 2, and 3, and this guy's miasma'd, which means his AoE applies to the other 2. All right, and it's the same for all 3 of them. So enemies that are grouped together, that are under the decay effect, that get shock applied to them, are going to take quite a lot of damage. And I can actually go through that a little bit more clearly, because it's not just the miasma that triggers in this case. It's actually the shock damage that's pretty crazy as well. So if 3 units are already under a smoke grenade, they're close together, and you energy echo them, all right, energy echo with energy orb, with lightning damage, 100% chance to apply lightning damage and do damage, they are going to take a very significant series of damages. First, they're going to take damage from the energy echo. Second, that is going to apply shock to all of them. When you apply shock, 50% of the damage gets dealt to all other enemies in the AoE, meaning it doesn't get applied to the actual person. The actual person takes just 10% increased damage. So The target, all three targets have 10% increased damage from all sources. and they each apply 2 instances of shock to the other 2. So we've got Energy Orb, 2 instances of shock. All of them get Miasma, okay? Which means that they apply that Miasma AoE to the other ones there. So they take 1 damage from Orb, 2 instances of damage from Shock, and 3 instances of Miasma instantly upon that Energy Orb applying. And that is how you take advantage of Miasma, because it's all that AoE effect that starts to overlap and do a crazy amount of damage. That's really what allows you to exploit my Miasma build that I use for the cat, which I think is very consistent. Alright, so let's talk about explosions. I think that covers everything for Miasma that I wanted to say. Yeah, okay, so explosions are different. So one of the things about Miasma is that ideally, this is the last thing I need to say. Ideally, you want to be doing damage, but if you were just doing 1 damage of shock damage, you and 1 damage of corrosion damage, as long as they have the effect, Miasma is going to do the same amount of damage. Because it's a fixed percentage health damage over time ability, your actual damage that causes the Miasma has no impact on the percentage health, as far as we know. And I think that is the case. So, using that as a jumping point, Explosion is the opposite. Explosion is based on the damaged instance that triggers it, which is why Fire Damage is exceptionally good for the grenade build, because any unit that's under the burning effect will have each tick of the smoke grenade increased by the value of the explosion damage, which is 200%. So that's where we're getting that really meaty damage from. So you're doing 100 damage per tick with a smoke grenade. If they're under burning, every explosion, every tick causes an explosion. You're doing 300 damage per tick. So that's really, really strong. And obviously it knocks them back and stuff. The Toxic Smoke Ascension benefits a lot. That 300% increase in smoke damage increases not only the damage of the smoke grenade, but it also increases the explosion damage as well. So you're getting cascading benefits from increasing that base damage. So that is where you're getting that synergy, and that's where the grenade build really gets strong. You're looking for weapons that are applying burning damage consistently, and there are lots of ways that we can do that, and I'll get into that in the grenade guide build. But if we are talking about fire damage and energy echo again, kind of comparing with the Miasma thing, if 3 units are hit with an energy echo powered by fire damage while they're under the decay effect, each unit would take the orb damage. They would take, I think, the first instance of the burning effect, and they would take 3 instances of the explosion damage. All right, and so because the explosions are overlapping with each other, and so you can, if they're close enough, you can do some really, really big bursts with this type of interaction. But it's not quite as consistent as the Miasma because it has a tendency to knock the opponents away from each other, and then they're not quite in range to do it again. Granted, still does a huge amount of damage. And really we want to be focusing on not the energy echoes, not tended to be recommended for the grenade build, because we want to rely on using our grenades and those damages per tick to trigger explosions to do massive damage. That's where we get it from. One thing to keep in mind is that Pyro Dominance, one thing that I don't know, and I don't think is on here, is the damage type of fusion effects. So, like, does, the actual damage applied by Miasma, is that true damage? Is that shock and decay? Is that just decay? How are those damages increased or decreased based on the actual HP type of the enemy that they're damaging? Not sure about that. I'd like to know. But that does create something that's rather interesting. If explosion damage is, say, fire damage, which would be my assumption, then Pyro Dominance, which we want to do when we're doing a grenade build. We want to go into the fire tree. Pyro Dominance level 3 doubles the explosion damage from 200% to 400%, which is extremely strong with the grenade build, because each of those ticks are now, now with Toxic Smoke level 1, you've got 100 multiplied by 3, that's, or increased by 300, so you're doing 400 damage per tick, and then each of those is multiplied by 4, that's 1600 damage per tick, and you're getting multiple ticks off of 1 grenade. and they get stunned off the first. I think there's a time. I don't know how the explosion works, but I think you can only be exploded once in a certain amount of time because otherwise it'd be overpowered. So Pyro Dominance level 3, that double explosion effect, something to keep in mind with the grenade build. I will say, as an aside, you pretty much never want to play any character hoping to get some level 3 Ascension. If that's necessary for your playstyle, I would call that an inefficient playstyle, or an inconsistent. That would be a better way to say it, an inconsistent playstyle, because it's so rare that you're going to be able to get that. I'd love to actually calculate out what that looks like, but I'm not sure. In the Longling Tomb, which is the first stage, it's really helpful to use the ceiling to bounce off grenades off the ceiling and then getting them behind cover. This is also good in the third stage in a couple areas where enemies are positioned pretty high up and it's really tough to get a grenade up there. So hit the ceiling above them and it will drop down on top of them and you'll be able to apply that decay effect. And you really need the decay effect to do the damage you need to do with the cat with any consistency. So that is a good tip, and if you watch any of my games, you'll see me doing that pretty consistently. This is a little tip, I guess, a little thing that I noticed, is if you use the Gemini inscription that shares a weapon's damage type to your main weapon, it will not register with Energy Echo and not empower the Energy Echo to actually use that element as it's firing off. So let's pop over. I need to bring this up anyway. So yeah, Energy Echo here. This will not work if the current weapon does not have an elemental effect chance. If it's shared from a Gemini, no go. It doesn't matter. This is that toxic smoke that I was talking about, and then obviously Pyro Dominance here. Fire damage plus 120% and double the damage caused by burning effect and explosion. I forgot about the burning effect, so that's pretty cool. That would mean that whenever you apply burning, instead of doing 100% damage over 5 ticks of damage, meaning 20% damage, you're doing 200, double the damage that caused the burning over 5 seconds, which is not. It would obviously depend on how much damage you're doing with each hit of burning, as opposed to how much burning you're applying, because burning overrides the previous burning. Only one instance of burning can be applied at one time. Okay, so let's talk about how to exploit your shields. Oh, I need to go here first. Crown Prince. Okay, so he normally, I clicked the wrong thing. He normally regens 10% of his shield per second, and he has 2 talents that affect his shield. Not talents, these things right here, perks, I guess. Lower for faster. The lower your shield, the faster it recovers. For each 10% shield lost, shield recovery is increased by 5%, and recover 5% shield for each enemy orb this hits. So this one here sounds better than it really is. You got to keep in mind that we're multiplying percents by percents. So yes, for each 10% we're gaining 5, which means at 0% we're having a 50% increase in shield recovery. Well, that's 50% of 10%. So we've got a 15% per second shield recovery rate at 0, and still a 10% per second shield recovery rate at 0, which is not a big increase. All right, but it is something, and it can be exploited. And what I'd like to say on that topic here is I recognize that this particular section does not include a lot of value to be gained from you immediately, but what is likely to be the case is if you gain a good understanding of it now, it is very likely to be changed later and tweaked in or made better. And then you are armed with the knowledge already to really exploit it and use it. And this will be obviously very helpful for you. So a little bit more importantly than the lower for faster is the 5% shield for each enemy your orb hits. This can be pretty good, and there's a lot of skill that comes into Energy Orb that I think gets glossed over by most players. When to use Energy Orb can be very, very efficient. The ideal scenario is you've taken some shield damage. You are reloading. You already have thrown a grenade out. You are in high threat. If you're doing all 4 of those with one Energy Orb, you're sending out a juicy Energy Orb because you're reducing threat. You don't need to throw a grenade. You are healing shield. And 5% you know, is 5 shield per person hit at the starting, basically 5. And then there was a second one. But you get what I'm saying. There's, you know, really, really high value there. Oh, and you're reloading, so you're not doing anything anyway. That was the second one. But recognizing that you don't necessarily want to use your energy orb immediately when you enter rooms to take one person out, and saving it for after you've taken some, you will take some shield damage. I mean, you can't play too slowly, otherwise you're not going to enjoy playing the Crown Prince. And the way that you can get a little bit in and out is by, once you're taking a little bit of shield damage, pop that energy orb and hit a couple people. And try to set it up to where you're hitting 3, 4 people, and you're actually getting a pretty good return off of that energy orb. And it's possible that gets better later. So sometimes advanced shield can be okay, even with silver metal. I really don't much agree with this. Very rarely. I think that you should pretty much never, ever, ever take this. Because it's the same thing. 30% times 10%. Okay, yeah, we've gained an extra 3% shield per second, which is not enough to be justifiable. Sure, up to 90%, yeah, that's great. For 20 seconds, that's great. Can't be interrupted, that's great. But, we never will ever play hoping to get a level 3. That's my suggestion, and I'm putting that out there as the way that I play. I never want to play for a level 3, especially one that sucks all the way up to level 3. No. All right. But instead of saying sometimes advanced shield can be okay, what I will say is silver metal can be very strong. And silver metal, just so that we are all on the same page here. I think it's right here. Silver metal. Your shield starts recharging whenever you kill an enemy or destroy an item. This is very, very strong on the cat because you have that lower for faster talent. When you're hurt, when your shield starts recharging after you kill an enemy, it means that you've taken some damage, which means you're charging your shield faster, which means you're getting more value after each kill. It's also actually, if you have silver metal, it is okay to take Resolute, and that can actually be a pretty niche situation. Normally, you'd never want to take Resolute because doubling the time a shield rest before recharging is usually not good. But in the case where you have the silver metal, you are gaining the 50% move speed and mostly the move speed at the time that you need it. When your shield breaks, even if you're in the air, you start moving faster while you're in the air. It can be quite good. Those two together, little aside there, little tip. All right, so. Did you always take shield upgrades from chat chests? Always take them. Always take them. Be careful for bandit tacticians and those catfish archer guys. Those guys do lightning damage, but you get benefits from having higher shield. So paranormality, that kind of stuff is really, really good on you. All of this stuff is percentage based that you're getting, so keep that in mind when you're choosing what to do with the cat, that you do have some natural perks to your shield, and we want to exploit those, even if they're not. We want to exploit everything we can, is the main thing. And these are things that we have. And granted, they're not amazing, but every little thing adds up and allows us to be more consistent. All right. I did want to say one more thing. Yes. So with all of this, with this perk, talent, whatever here, recover 5% shield for each enemy orb you hit, we are starting to get into a claim that I'm going to make by the end of this video, that Blinding Sphere is much better than you may have been giving it credit for. In my Miasma build, I rate Blinding Sphere higher than all of the rest of these. I rate it higher than these ones here. Blinding and level 1, 2, and 3. Especially level 1, but I think it scales fairly well for what you're getting out of it. And we'll talk more about this here, but one of the reasons is because you're hitting more people with one orb. And granted, that reduces threat from more enemies, which is always good, but it constitutes more shield that you're regenerating, and you need every defensive option that you can get because you are not guaranteed to get scrolls that are defensive. And if you don't have anything, and you're not playing around what your kit actually has, you're going to die. Unless you're God tier, and I'm not God tier, so I have to do this kind of stuff. All right, use grenade damage indicators and the minimap to track enemies you cannot see. So one of the cool things about the cat is you have to play slower. That's not the cool thing. But you're given a tool that's a little bit sneaky. That's a little unexpected. The damage ticks from smoke grenade are very good at helping you visualize where enemies are when you're hiding behind cover. And you should be hiding behind cover in Solo Nightmare, especially as the cat, unless you have a godlike run. For the most part, I have to hide behind cover the most with the cat. But importantly, if I throw a couple grenades out, I can see where they're going. You know, I can see through the rock I'm hiding behind, you know, where they're going. And with the minimap as well, the minimap's pretty bare bones, which I kind of like because it's a little hard to use, which I kind of like. But the cat has a good way of kind of keeping a sense of where enemies are, better than others, I would say. And that's a little tip. That's pretty useful. I do that more than I notice. It's like Rainbow. Rainbow shoots through walls. So, you know, you can just hold down fire and it doesn't fire any ammo while you're holding it down, and the second they get in range, you know, you're starting to do damage. You know when they're close. Alright, energy orb stun is reduced every time you hit an elite or boss, and I think this actually applies to all enemies, if I'm not mistaken, but it is most notable on elites and bosses. So the idea is that every time you hit somebody with your energy orb or any stun, the next time you do it, it's a reduced stun duration. And this goes down until you're like barely even stunning them. And it's like not even, it's just, you're just throwing damage at them. You're not actually, you know, stopping anything. So don't waste the stun duration of the ability until you actually need it. There are certain bosses at certain timings in this game where you are going to need a high stun duration to like do damage. There are two that come to mind immediately. There is the spinning guy in the Longling Tomb, the elite. If you get slowed, you get clipped by a corrosion grenade. First hit applies corrosion. You know, you're dead if you have already stunned that elite twice, you know, at no gain. I would assume a lot of people, the second they see that elite, they throw a energy orb at his face, get 15 headshots, and they're like, man, that was a good energy orb. And then, you know, they probably beat him. I beat him most of the time, even if I'm not playing optimally. But every once in a while, you know, if you're not actually saving that energy orb, he's just going to kill you right when he's on top of you. So save your energy orbs when it matters. The second one is Wind God. Wind God can be very annoying, and some of the weapons that I tend to suggest for my builds are not the best against the Wind God. And so saving your energy orb for when you can really pump that damage in. You know, when he's close, you're not getting pushed back, you're not chased by a tornado, and you've got him decayed. It's like throw that energy orb and get, you know, 20 headshots in, because you need that. Otherwise, it's going to take so long for you to get him, and you're just increasing your risk as that fight goes on. Because if I understand them, if I remember the fight correctly, it does get harder over time with enemies that spawn and the amount of tornadoes that come at you. Okay. You can, I'm going to show you this one. You can time your energy orb against the worm so that he never throws any corrosion balls. And it can do massive damage if it's timed perfectly. I'm not quite sure how the damage part of it works. It's been really inconsistent for me, but here, let me pull up one of my runs here. I think this is one where I did okay. Yeah, okay, alright. Yeah, go down. Okay, so watch this. Not this one. Oh, he's gonna go under. Hold on. Okay, so getting this timing down is so useful for this boss, because this is one of the harder bosses for you because of that high armor. And if you have 2 energy orbs, he'll basically never get his corrosion balls off. And if you get corroded, you're dead. I mean, that's just how it works with this character. Unless you have some way to improve your speed, you are just dead. So, yeah, that's how that works. And I really suggest that you play around that, because that is very useful on that boss. All right. So the next one that I want to talk about is binding your weapon swap hotkey to your mouse, or something that's easy to spam, because you really need to take advantage of elemental weave every chance that you get with this character. And you know, I don't know what the chances are of you getting any particular scroll each run, but they're not super high. But 1 in 5, maybe you get the opportunity. But here's my mouse. It's a Rocat Amino, and I really like it because it's big. But this one here is the easiest one for me to use, and it's my weapon swap. And this one is my secondary fire, my secondary ability, excuse me. And then this one here is my alternating fire for weapons. So, Elemental Weave, and there are quite a lot of benefits to just weapon swapping in general, but Elemental Weave is one of the, Advanced Depot Demon Lore combinations, but that's just for the cat. Because you have that guaranteed decay application, decay on them with a lightning gloves, you're going to just melt them. You really are. You're going to apply so many stacks of Miasma in an AoE, they're all going to Miasma each other. It's just going to be, they're dead. They're dead. Not even counting all the shocks that you're going to be applying. But what's important is getting good at it for other reasons as well. There's the refilling your ammo when you swap, which can be very exploited. That is a very good scroll. That is very technically oriented, and if you're good at weapon swapping, you can really abuse it. Especially with like 1 or 2 mag weapons, you can make them an infinite mag weapon if you can click this button fast enough. I mean, it's just double click, bam, and you can click it like just like that, and you're back, and it switches that fast. Brief respite. I don't know if I can find these within any, quick amount of time. Brief respite, I'll just tell you. Brief respite is the 1-second immunity on weapon swap. That's another really good one. And I'd make a legitimate argument that there are times when I'm playing the Crown Prince and I have a lightning weapon on one hand and a fire weapon on the other. The ideal situation would be lightning blast and fire dragon, boom, and you can just swap between them because both of those are very, very good at applying the elemental effects that I'm looking for. And usually in that case, I'm going for the lightning blast as my main weapon, but if a powerful enemy comes at me and I've already got the shock effect applied to them, switch to Fire Dragon, pump them a little bit, and they're manipulated and they're running the other direction. And I have time to get other people killed, to get out of there, to get my shield recharged, to get some smoke grenades from barrels. So being able to weapon swap and being familiar with that process is very, very useful on the cat. Having 2 weapons is very useful on the cat. It is very much the case that I tend to swap weapons back and forth. So keep that in mind, and I would say if you haven't done that yet, do it now. Take the hit earlier so that you're better later. Because if you wait to switch your hotkeys around, you're never gonna. It gets harder and harder the more you get used to them. Don't be afraid to change your hotkeys around. You'll get used to it again. All right, so the next one is practice efficient grenading and energy orbing while reloading. The cat is one of the characters that no matter which build you end up playing, you will be constantly throwing your secondary fire. It is not the same with cleave, it is not the same with explosive grenades, it is not the same with chain lightning. You can ignore all 3 of those secondaries if you've got something else going on, but the cat is not the same. The cat requires it is entirely based on smoke grenade, and if you are not comfortable with efficient grenading and energy orbing while reloading, you're going to waste a lot of time. So what am I talking about? I think most people will know this, but just as a clarification, when you start your reload animation, all right, you can throw a grenade or cast an energy orb while still reloading in the background. But you have to start the reload animation first, otherwise it's not going to work. So this gets even more complicated when we start adding the Wildfire Ascension in, and since that one's easy to find, I'll bring it up. But Wildfire is a great 1-point wonder, and it increases your rate of fire for 6 seconds anytime you kill an enemy with an elemental effect. 6 seconds is usually enough time for you to chain to another kill, especially if you know what you're doing and you're trying to get it to last. That's kind of tough, but it's not too hard. But the reason this is important is because it's likely that you're going to take at least one of these in most runs. So we want to make sure that we're during our reload time, we're using it efficiently. So as a quick calculation, if we have my boy Lightning Blast, and he's got a rate of fire of 6.5 shots per second, a magazine size of 35, and a reload time of 1.3 seconds. Normally you'd burn a clip in about 5.4 seconds, right? And then you'd reload for 1.3 seconds, putting yourself at a 75% firing uptime. Meaning that if you're holding the trigger down, just holding the trigger down and then reloading, and then you should keep repeating that, 75% of the time you're going to be firing, all right? But let's say you have Wildfire level 3, your rate of fire increases by 60%. Now you have a firing ratio that is different, and you're only firing at 60% of the time, okay? And certain weapons are way worse about this. You know, if you have a scalpel that you're putting on alternate fire, and it has like, you know, fire inscription or lightning inscription and something, that's what you're using for your main weapon, which would be sick. But you burn through that clip, and there's a lot of time when you're reloading. And if you're not throwing grenades while reloading, you're wasting shots. You're just cutting your damage at the knees. So it's really important that you get used to using grenades and energy orbs while reloading and trying to be efficient with that. Because if you've only got 4 rounds in the magazine on your weapon, and then you throw a grenade without hitting that reload button first, I'm upset with you. Because then you're going to fire 4 shots and reload while you're staring at decayed enemies who are shooting at you. And that's really inefficient and will get you killed. Focus on that. Play slowly and really focus on being efficient so that it becomes just part of who you are to do that every time. Like, you're not going to reload. You're not going to throw a grenade until you have to reload. You know, that kind of stuff. Or you're not going to energy orb until you press reload. That kind of stuff is super, super useful. So let's talk about smoke grenades and break down what the efficient way to build a smoke grenade damage is. And how to be efficient without wasting talents or ascensions, excuse me. So, smoke grenades do like around 100 damage per second, something like that. They get some bonuses and stuff. Let's see, I think I've got it right here. You know, it's 112 damage per tick for 450 damage to shields and health, and 225 damage per tick for a total of 900 damage to armor, and that is level 1. And that includes the different armor and damage interactions. And notice that corrosion damage is effectively double damage against shields compared to the other 2 HP types, and that's intentional. So this you know, minus 25% damage to health and shields and plus 50% damage to armor doesn't intuitively manifest itself as double damage, you know, between the two, but that is what it is. So you can see that here in this calculation. So toxic smoke increases that damage by 300%. So we multiply the base damage by 400% because we're increasing by 300. So we need to include the 100% there. So it's a 4 times damage increase. So we go from a 600 total base damage times 4 to 2400, which is 450 damage per tick or 900 damage per tick depending on the armor type. Or HP type that you're actually doing the damage to. So that's, we'll just focus on armor, okay? No, we'll focus on shields and HP. I think it's a little bit more normal. So it starts off at 450, then with 1 level of toxic smoke, we go to 1800. Instead, if we get 1 level of smoke genius, we go to a total of 675 from 450. So, not good. Yeah. Like, very, very low increase, okay? But 1 level of toxic smoke increases us from 450 to 1800, which is massive, okay? But the next level only adds another 100% more damage. So now we're actually only adding another 20% damage increase in this level here. And so you can really feel how much like less of an impact that has. So if you have level 1 smoke genius, all right, and level 1 toxic smoke, we get a 33% increase from just 1 level of toxic smoke. So this is really important, and this is important to know. What you can recognize, and what's more obvious when you think about it, is that the toxic smoke level 1 is a value point for grenade builds, and after the first point, Smoke Genius becomes more important because the total amount of damage that you're doing has increased significantly. Because every time that you get Smoke Genius, you're adding more damage intervals. And they do a great job showing this here. Let me pull it up. Crown Prince, Smoke Genius. Alright, so with the Ascension, without Ascensions, it's 4 hits in 3 seconds for 400 total. Level 1 is 6 hits, then 8 hits, and then 13 hits. Alright, so we're adding 2 instances of damage for each of the first 2 levels and increasing the duration of the decay effect by 1, and then at level 3 we increase it significantly. And so you can tell that adding 6, going from 4 hits to 6 hits is a 50% increase in hits, because half of 4 is 2, and 4 plus 2 is 6. Going from 6 to 8 hits is a 33% increase, and then 8 to 13 is something. It's some amount of increase that I can't calculate off the top of my head. The idea being that once you start looking at the numbers, after you get your first level of Toxic Smoke, Smoke Genius becomes more effective. It is more damage per point after you got 1 level of Toxic Smoke. 1 level of Toxic Smoke is integral S tier pick for grenade builds, along with Acidic Explosion. But even higher than Acidic Explosion is the level 1 Toxic Smoke. Alright. I think that covers that. I don't think there was more I wanted to say on that, but I have more to say in general. I don't think there's... Okay, so that covers that. Let's talk about Ascensions in general. Okay, I'm going to make the claim to you that barring there are a few bad Ascensions. A few bad Ascensions. Acid Dominance. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a sec. Okay, Elemental Shield, Advanced Shield, Backpack Expansion is okay. 1 level of it is okay. And the rest are okay. The rest are pretty good. So I would say that this guy has 1, 2 trash tier Ascensions that are not good ever. 1 that is bad and is a trap. I'm going to call this a trap. Acid Dominance is a trap. And then 1 that's only good with 1 point. After that, you're just wasting points in this. 1 point usually is enough to cover you if you're really struggling with your damage and you're having to smoke grenade every unit to kill them. Then you will run out of smoke grenades. And some games you just don't get damage. So 1 level of Backpack Expansion, if it's between Backpack Expansion, Elemental Shield, and Advanced Shield, unless you have something that's already increasing your smoke grenade capacity, grab this guy. Having those 4 extra, grenades gets you maybe through 3 more enemies than you normally would have, and one of those guys maybe has another grenade, and it allows you to continue playing. Whereas if you're out of grenades, you're dead for the most part, unless you have a really good build. So let's talk about Acid Dominance. So I mentioned this earlier, that I think that Acid Dominance is a trap, because it is... Every guide that I've ever read that talks about Acid Dominance is like, but if you get level 3, and I think that any time that you play any character with the hope of getting a specific level 3, like if someone says, yes, you're offered Acid Dominance early, you should take it because of the chance that you get level 3, means that you're relying not on anything that's consistent, but you're totally rolling the dice, because if these damage increases are not very helpful. 40% corrosion damage is not very useful. You should not be in Solo Nightmare. You would be crazy to be using a corrosion damage weapon as the cat. Keep that stuff in normal. Where you don't know what you're doing. That's not for Solo Nightmare. All right, so we're not using corrosion damage weapons. So this is only going to be affecting our smoke grenades, and it's maybe you're sharing a weapon type. That's the only time, but that is so rare that by the time I get offered Geminis, usually I've got a weapon that's working, that I've got, level 8 or 9, and it's really hard to find a better weapon than that, usually in the late game. Alright, so I made my case. Acid Dominance is a trap. I made my case about Backpack Expansion. These guys are terrible. You now know how that shield recharge works. If it was 30% per second for 6 seconds, that'd be great, but it's not. It's like 3% increase per second. Okay, I'm going to make the case that in element here, Wildfire is a 1-point wonder ability. Okay, 1-point wonder ability. I'm going to make the case that everything over on the right-hand side, these two, are also very good 1-point wonder abilities. All right, let's take a second to look through these. First off, Wildfire, level 1, 40% rate of fire increase. Go to level 2, 10% increase in rate of fire. Waste of it. Once again, you're making that thought where you're hoping to get level 3, and that's not consistent. Level 1 is extremely valuable, and we want to stick with that. Obviously, these guys scale more linearly, and then obviously these are guaranteed 1-point wonders. Backpack expansion is good as a 1-point ascension. You never want more than that, because 4 more grenades is usually enough on those games where you need the decay effect. Hex Smoke, you get the most value by far from the first point. 50% damage decrease and 20% damage increase is more of an increase than every single one further than that. And enemies don't live for 20 seconds if you're playing this game correctly. They just don't live for 20 seconds. By the time that you're fighting them, they need to be dead faster than that. So the 20 seconds doesn't matter. Maybe you can make a case that Hex Smokes is better in multiplayer where people take longer to kill. But I'm casting, Smoke Grenade again within 6 seconds because I need to reapply my decay effect. I'm making a strong case that level 1 is all you ever needed Hex Smoke, and it is S tier, super, super high, one of the best in the game. It is probably the best single point ascension in the game. Toxic Smoke, I've already probably convinced you as, is a 1-point wonder ability. The level 3 is good, but the level 2 is weak. And you do not get a good linear progression from level 1 to level 3. And so keeping it at level 1 is worth it. On the other hand, Smoke Genius does have a better build up, but only if you're going grenades. Only if you're going for the grenade build. So that would be the fire damage plus grenade build. But level 1, a 1-second increase and more ticks of damage can be good as a 1-point wonder ability even in the Miasma, because you're adding 2 ticks of damage, which is 2 Miasma ticks, and increasing it for 1 more second extends the life of each grenade that you're casting, which can be useful. I do wish this would increase like the range by the radius by 10% or something, but it might, wishful thinking. That's just a wish. All right, these bad boys, barring Advanced Shield, I'm going to make the case that each of these is extremely powerful as a 1-point wonder. The ideal run for me when I'm doing my Slight's Miasma build is 1 point in each of these. Maybe not Energy Blade because it depends on whether or not I have a weapon that can utilize it, but usually I do. It's not hard to find one. 1 point in Energy Blade means I get to take out a Bandit Retainer before the fight starts. All of these are very, very good as 1-point wonders. If you're not going for the lightning build, Blinding Sphere is still very good because increasing the radius of what you're hitting is very strong. I'd say this is best in a lightning build though, even the first point. But we have normally Energy Orb freezes for 2 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 2 seconds. So we're getting a 100% increase in the duration of the stun, and then moving from, so now we have a 4-second duration on the stun, and then we move to add 2 more seconds, and it's a 50% increase. So level 2 sucks. And then we move from 6 total to add 2 more, and we get a 33% increase. So it's not as good. Even with the minus cooldown timer, it's not that good, but level 1 is extremely good. Having 1 more energy orb is I would say, like, all you need. Okay, you could make the case that level 2 is pretty good. All right, level 2 of this one is not so bad, but doubling the amount of orbs that you have is very, very strong, because then you can save them for the right times and you can use them a little bit more frequently. You don't have to save them to try to get the most value out of them. Energy Bolt is very, very strong, especially with a grenade build. If you are forced into an Energy Echo pick, this Energy Bolt becomes very strong, because remember, explosion damage is calculated based on the base instance of damage that hits it. So Energy Bolt, being that base damage, is a very large amount of damage happening at once to multiple targets and having a chance to reapply that Energy Bolt damage. 1 level of this is very good, especially because usually by the time you have that, if you can get it before you go into the desert, this deals with bandit retainers very well, and we all know that the cat struggles with bandit retainers. Anything that's mid and high range usually eats him alive. Okay, I went through all those, and I went through that one. And I think that covers that. That's a lot of my opinion on his Ascensions. I think that many of them function best as one-point wonders. The cat is probably one of the most flexible characters, and you really want to build him all around because everything he has is so strong once you start into it. And he doesn't get nearly as much benefit from really focusing into one thing. There are exceptions, I would say, that depending on which build you're doing, you know, if you've decided you're doing the grenade build, you know, usually there are a few indicators, you know, that you're going down that path and you've reached the critical amount of decisions that are pushing you in that direction. You know, maybe by, you know, the 5th chest that you've opened after you kill the first boss. You know, at that point it starts to be worth it, you know, to get fire damage because we're doubling our effectiveness from level 1 to level 2, and then we're, you know, increasing even more at level 3 because we're doubling the damage of burning effect and explosion effect. I wish that the lightning damage had a little bit better tertiary effect with a 50% lucky shot chance against enemies at shock. It's pretty good. It's not bad. 50% lucky shot is pretty good. You know, that constitutes with your inherent lucky shot a 75% chance to do double damage. So 75 times 2 is... Yeah, that was embarrassing. It was embarrassing that I calculated that out. But this constitutes 150 increase extra on all of your lightning damage that you're doing. And that also affects the shock effects that you're applying. As long as you're applying them with damage from weapons. So these ones are worth going into more. And Elemental Rage, I will pick this one. I think it's a great ability. I'll pick this one if I'm undecided. If I'm offered Pyro Dominance, Elemental Rage, and Advanced Shield, and I don't have any reason to believe that I'm going down the grenade path, I will pick Elemental Rage. It's 10% less damage, but it's flexible and will meet the needs of whatever I choose to do, whereas this will be useless if I end up having to go for a Miasma build. So I think that covers everything that I want to share with the way that I'm playing Nightmare right now. You need to be safe with the cat. You need to play a slower game. And you need to be very efficient with your energy orbs. Energy orb feels a little underwhelming if you don't really know how to take advantage of it. But the Miasma build really makes great use of blinding sphere. Yeah, blinding sphere. And if I haven't made the case here, I'm going to make it now about blinding sphere. I talked about how energy echo works with lightning damage when you've got them applied and you're hitting in a large AoE. And blinding sphere really magnifies the utility of your energy orb because it really allows you to reset and cut out threat from a large group of enemies, which can be very tough. You don't have an escape. You don't, but you do have energy orb. So you have to plan, you have to be ahead of the game, like most support characters are. I come from Dota 2 where, you know, being a support is about anticipating the enemy's moves. And it's very similar with the cat. You need to notice when you are in a position where there's a chance that you can die or take damage, and it's getting bad, and you want to cut the threat out, not by escaping physically, but by enabling or by reducing the enemy's threat against you. And Blinding Spear does that very well while doing a huge amount of damage. Because, don't forget, Shock, when it applies to targets, does damage to everything around you, or does damage to all other enemies. Well, the area effect on that is actually quite large. So if you hit like 5 enemies with Blinding Spear, that damage that you applied gets multiplied. You know, that's 4 instances of shock damage on each of them, which is 200% of the Blinding Sphere damage. So if you've got Blinding Sphere plus 1 level of Energy Bolt, and you hit 5 enemies, that means that the shock you're applying is doing 50% of 300% of energy bolt 4 times plus the actual energy bolt damage, which is a lot. And so that, this 600 is not correct because it increases by 50%. So it's like 900 times 2, which is 1800, divided by 2 is 9 times 4, which is 3600, plus 900 again, which is 4500 damage in an AoE, if you include the shock damage effects. So that's my case for Blinding Spear here. It does a lot of things for you. Don't forget the shield that you get, and the way that it applies Miasma in a big AoE. Alright? All those things. This is underrated. Very, very strong. And the energy orb deals 50% damage for each target it hits. It just gets insane. With 1 level in energy bolt, this does crazy, crazy damage. So I think that's going to do it for me for my Nightmare tips. I hope that the informality wasn't a negative thing for you, and I hope that this was helpful, because I really enjoy discussing this and learning about this kind of stuff. And the Crown Prince is tough on Solo Nightmare. He is no joke. It is brutal. I've been trying to increase the speed at which I go through the runs, and I have been brutally smacked down by enemies over and over again, because they punish you so hard for being out of position with the cat. And there are some times when you really when you run out of grenades and you do not have a lot of damage, there are some rooms you just lose. You get overwhelmed, or you get into a position where that floating cube dies when you're trying to defend it. That one is really bad if you're not getting good damage and you start running out of grenades, because you really rely on your grenades to do that damage. No more rambling. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Be well.